So it's an enormous delight when one starts looking at the theme to bump into similarly curious people that have taken that same theme very, very far. And I think it was the case with this year's Spanish pavilion that our guest, Eduardo Castillo-Vinuesa, am I pronouncing it well enough, is the chief curator of. And I couldn't be happier that he was able to fly over from Madrid and join, or from Venice, I'm not sure where did you fly from, Madrid. And join us for giving a lecture tonight. It really feels that kind of it is an important moment to talk about food in all these different ways. And I think we could not be luckier in having his voice, his research, his insight as part of this year's summer school, London's Belly. Eduardo is an antidisciplinary architect, and I hope he will explain that term that I'm very intrigued by. Curator and researcher based in Madrid, Spain. He's an associate professor of architecture at ETSAM. It's the kind of the amazing school in Madrid. And he's also an active member of several research groups there. Oh, sorry. Since 2021, he's the director of MEDIALAB at Matadero, and I'm a very interesting space in Madrid. You should definitely visit if you're there. That brings together artists, designers, researchers, thinkers, scientists, engineers, architects, public policymakers, and many other agents to collaboratively address issues of social, technological, and ecological relevance. I'm not going to say more. I'm going to pass the floor to him. Again, I'm very, very happy that you're here. Thank you for joining the conversation, both from this platform, but also talking with our units. We are going to have time for questions later on, and we will continue the conversation with drinks on the terrace. Welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Sophia, for your kind words, also for the invitation. Thank you to the EA. Thank you to all of you for coming today here. And yeah, actually looking forward to spend some time with, I already did with some of the units, but looking forward to spend more time tomorrow with some of you. Maybe we can leave the antidisciplinary questions for later. That's this, the first, can be like the first cue. But yeah, as Sophia said, and also in the context of MEDIALAB Matadero, that by the way, is so good to see some familiar faces around here that already participate with us there in Madrid. We started to look at food like since actually a long time ago. And last year, when the public competition for the selection of the curator of the Spanish Pavilion emerged within the context of Leslie Lowe Laboratory of the Future, it was actually like quite straightforward that we thought we should apply for it with a project that I'm going to present today, which is called FOODSCAPES. I'm going to start by reading a text. It's not my text. Was written by this gentleman in the picture, but I want you to visualize what the text is saying. Okay. You all have seen motion pictures run backwards, where people dive out the swimming pool back onto the board. I'm going to run a motion picture of you backwards. You have just had breakfast. Now I'm going to run the pictures backwards, and all the food comes out of your mouth onto the plate, and then the plates go back up onto the serving tray, and things go back onto the stove, back into the icebox. Then they come out of the icebox and back into the cans, and then they go back to the stores, and then from the stores they go back to the wholesaler. Then they go back to the factories where they have been put together, and then they go back to the trucks and ships, and they finally get back to the pineapples in Hawaii. Then the pineapple separates out, go back into the air, the raindrops go back into the sky, and so forth. But in a very fast accelerated reversal of a month, practically everything you have eaten gradually becoming your skin, your hair, and so forth, a month ago was nothing more than air coming over the mountains. In other words, you get completely deployed. I want you to think of yourself in this way, as assemblages. If we had some way of putting tracers on the pictures, you will see the chemicals element gradually getting closer and closer together, and finally getting into those various vegetable places and into rows, and tighter into cans, into the store, finally getting to just being you or me, temporarily becoming your air, my ear, or some part of your skin. And then that breaks up and goes off and gets blown around as dust. Each of us are a very complex pattern integrity with which we are born. That text was written in 1981 by Buckminster Fuller. It was the prologue of this book that you can see here, Synergetic Stew, which was a birthday gift that was given to him by his friends. And now I would like to invite you to think about the different settings where all those scenes that Fuller was narrating into his text took place. You know, think of the everyday laboratory of the kitchen, where your breakfast have been unfolded into ingredients and reassembled into tins and containers. But also think about the social and political centrality of this space in our domestic architectures. Now think of the supermarket to which they return, strategically placed on meticulously ordered shelves to trigger the consumption desire of certain culinary materialisms. From there, think on the roads and motorways, and the drug bars and hotels of the rest areas, dispersed urbanisms inhabited by nomadic autonauts who safeguard the inverted route of our food to the automated landscape of ports and logistics centers, where mechanic ecologists reorganize them to return them to their place of origin. These anodyne places, mostly generic cubes in the outskirts of our cities, may never appear in glossy pages of a fancy architecture magazine such Architectural Digest, QG, or El Croquis. Well, who knows? But however, the metabolic processes that they entail are essential so we all can have our daily breakfast. But let's not stop there, and let's go further back and visualize the plantations, greenhouses, and slaughterhouses to which our ingredients return. Soft urbanisms designed to instrumentalize whole territories. Think of the bodies, human, vegetable, animal, mechanic, that are exploited there, as well as the political, technological, and ecological implications of the productive architectures that make this possible. And finally, imagine the soil into which they are reabsorbed, and of the almost magical process that allows the geological to become biological, the inorganic into organic. Acknowledge the photosynthesis, the nitrogen fixation, microbial metabolism, and the complex physical and chemical processes necessary to fossilize the sun into an infinite variety of textures and flavors. Well, this is a trailer that we did for the pavilion that is open since the 19th of May in Venice, and it's going to be showcasing the projects that I'm going to present today until the 26th of November, if I recall right. with the subtitles by eating with digest territories, and we really mean it, like literally, Foodscapes is a journey into the architectures that feed the world. From the domestic laboratories of our kitchens to the vast operational landscapes that nourish our cities. At a time when energy debates are more pertinent than ever, food somehow, or in some places, it still remains in the background. Yet, the way we produce it, distribute it, and consume it mobilizes our societies, shapes our metropolises, and transforms our geographies more deeply and more radically than any other energy source, as you probably know for the program you guys are currently doing. Sorry about the meme. I know you guys had Joshua Citarella a few days ago, so probably you are used to memes already, but I couldn't avoid to put this one because there are still places where we present the project, or that people ask, what's the connection between food and architecture? And every time someone asks that, I realize that it's still pertinent that we do this kind of projects, because actually agriculture and architecture have been running together as an autocatalytic process since 12,000 years ago, right? In the way that you actually can't conceive one without the other. Like, what came first, right? This kind of egg-chicken thing where you don't know what came first, if the settlements or actually the agrarian practices that allow the settlements to actually appear. I had the chance to go to, probably most of you recognize this image, is the Machu Picchu citadel in Peru. I had the chance to actually go to Peru last summer, a few months before we presented the candidacy for the pavilion. I also took a picture of it, but mines are horrible. I don't know how they do it, how they delete all the people. But basically, if you look into Google and you search Machu Picchu, this is the image that you find, which is the citadel of Machu Picchu. The image that is not that easy to find in Google is this other one. That was actually mine. This image is the counterplane. Is the counter image, is the image that is from which the other image is taken, is the part that remains out of frame. And it's all the different terraces that were necessary to feed Machu Picchu. So it was very striking to me that architecture for a long time has always looked at the left part of this image, at the citadel, but somehow also have externalized or invisibilized like the set of different landscapes that are instrumentalized and operationalized so the event of the city can actually take place. The city couldn't exist without the quarries where the materials are extracted, without the places where energy is produced so it can light up the buildings that we live on. The places where food is produced so actually we can wake up every morning and have our daily breakfast and coffee. So Foodscape somehow looks to reclaim this landscape as part of the architectural practice. That being said, and even the name of the project is called Foodscapes, the reality is that Foodscapes is not about food. Food is not the message, it's just the medium through which we engage with certain kind of scenarios that we want to light up. We could say it's about the food system, but not quite. To be more precise, we could say it's about the food system architecture, the bunch of architectures that made up the food system, and we are close, but not only. If we have to define what Foodscapes is the food system has an architecture. So instead of thinking of these places in isolation, supermarkets, greenhouses, farms, warehouse, logistics networks, cold chains, wastelands, some of these images that you saw in the initial video, we invite you to look at them as a whole, as constitutive parts of a large metabolic megastructure formed by the union of architectures of multiple scales and condition. So what is important for us in that sense is not only to reclaim the architectures that made up the food system, but the food system itself has an architecture. And that in somehow reclaims upscaling of what architecture actually is. I'm pretty sure each one of us has like a very narrow definition, or not a narrow definition of what architecture is. For me, architecture is the artificial modification of a certain environment so it can cope with a specific programmatic, spatial, or climatic conditions. If you look at the world in that way, you will realize that, of course, buildings are architectures. You know, you create those specific conditions through the creation of walls, ceilings, the different elements that an architect told us, like not so many biennales ago, but also in many other ways. If you conceive it the way in which I frame it, you know, cold chains are distributed architectures. Greenhouses are architectures, but also the whole food system, which basically reassemble the earth crust into human beings, is also an architecture. That's what we brought, and that's what we did in the pavilion. That again is up in Venice until the 26th of November. But we did that. We wanted to explore the architecture of the food system, taking Spain as a case study. That's because mostly two reasons. The first one is that, as you probably know, Spain is one of Europe's foods engine. It's produce a lot of vegetables for Europe. Actually, almost half of the surface of Spain is destined to the production of food, directly or indirectly, but also because the exposure that the country has to issues related to climate change and how they can affect to the food systems. So the project is divided into three main parts or blocks: a series of short films, a set of total recipes that we'll explain later what those are, and a public program of collaborative research. Three important points is that unlike most of the pavilions that, at least the Spanish pavilion that took place in recent years at Venice, we wanted to use the context of the pavilion as a place from which we could unfold a research project that materialized into a series of new commissions. This is the first important point. Everything you're going to see today are projects that have been produced specifically for the pavilion. Also, it's a project which is a research project. Like everything you're going to see today are the crystallization of several and different types of research projects. And also, that is a profoundly interdisciplinary, I don't know if antidisciplinary, but at least interdisciplinary and collaborative approach. Like every project that you're going to see today have been produced by teams of architects working with other experts from different disciplines. So let's start with the short films. Again, instead of thinking of all these busters, architectures as independent elements, i.e. the architecture of the food systems, we propose to see them as a whole, i.e. the food system has architecture. But if the entire agri-food system is an architecture, the first question that emerged to us was, what's its anatomy? What's the structure of such an architecture? And for us, it composed of 5 different layers: digestion, consumption, distribution, production, and foundation. The 3 main ones probably you already know, production, distribution, and consumption, but we always thought that there were like a prologue and an epilogue that transformed this kind of linearity in a possible circularity that for us was very, very important. So all this materialized in an audiovisual project composed of 5 short films. Each one of them is delving into one of the 5 constitutive layers of the agrologistic process. Because of the time, we cannot watch all the movies today, but I will be showing you some parts of it. Let's start with the episode 1. Similar like in the way Fuller was narrating the text, we will go backwards. We will start at digestion, which is the most familiar moment of how we relate to food. And from there, we'll go backwards. So when we eat, we are not the only ones involved in the process of digestion. The UN, for example, estimates that around 70% of the food we produce ends up in the garbage bin. Here, alongside the byproducts of our own digestive processes, our leftovers begin an invisible journey, wending their way through the underground guts of our cities. Interestingly, it is in these hidden places that the contracts between the city and the ecologies that sustain them are established. This film has been produced by the architecture office Eli in tandem with a visual artist called Maria Jerez. I will tell you a little bit more about them later. It's important to mention explicitly that all the projects that you're going to see are part of a collective research project, so it's not only my research. So everything we're gonna present is also the projects that these different teams did. So as I was saying, we usually understand digestion to be a process in which our digestive systems transform food into substances that our bodies can assimilate. But this is just a negligible part of all the digestive processes in which we participate and in which we are entangled. While our stomachs and intestines extract nutrients, many other bodies, in many other places, and at many other times, are incessantly digesting in many different ways, comprising a colossal waste processing ecosystem which, paradoxically, tends to remain invisible. There is sound? So, defecation may seem to put an end to the process of digestion, but actually it's just the beginning of this colossal tentacular system. In Madrid alone, for example, the sanitation system encompasses 15,317 kilometers of pipes, 34 kilometers of water mains, 35 storm water ponds, and 8 wastewater treatment stations. All of them conforming a sort of invisible biotechnological city that is disseminated over a strategic landscape of incommensurable inertia and dynamics. Also, one can get the impression that when one throws leftovers into the rubbish, the problem of waste disappears with it. But behind this everyday gesture, food waste continues to transform rubbish into landscapes. New food for new stomachs, into products like biogas, compost, chemical fertilizers, feed, drugs, cosmetics, oils, gelatins, skin for sausages. On this journey, waste is valued, economized, commodified, monetized, sold, incinerated, fetishized. And although generally we are barely aware of its existence and assume that it has no impact on our everyday life, the truth is that it radically alters our habitats. As the FAO indicates in his report Food Waste Footprints, for example, published in 2013, if the impact of the world food waste were equated with a country emissions, it will rank third in CO2 emissions into the atmosphere behind China and the United States, with an average of 3.3 million tons of CO2 released yearly. More than a country, this process of processes is actually a creature in itself, a creature that digests and digests us. Where are we? This is the way in which the team who did this film like to define the digestion layer as a creature. It's there, although we don't see it. It's a monster, huge, at the same time, tiny being. It is a body of bodies made up of a labyrinth of organisms, architectures, artifacts, infrastructures, territories, landscapes, geologies, technologies, black boxes, waste, scrap metal, biota, microbiota, stomachs, microplastics, gases, fossils, sludge, organic and inorganic material, transaction, regulations, valuation, beliefs, myth, goals. It is an unfathomable choreography because it's rolled out in a process of interdependent socio-technical processes. It has many agencies and scales, from geographic to microbial, planetary to molecular. It works in polytemporal cycles and links age-old situations to ordinary paces, profound times to the near future. It inhabits the ground under our feet, in our guts, in system with biotechnological tentacles. We live both inside and outside this creature. It cuts through us. It's a metabolic dynamic entity whose matter is in constant metamorphosis. It's a digestion of digestions incessantly exchanging, relating, and disassembling with others. It transforms each piece of waste into a resource, the unfruitful into fertile, the urgent into indifferent, but also the other way around. It is exuberant and fecund, repugnant and sublime, invisible yet omnipresent. It is a heterogeneous intelligence that goes beyond any human exceptionalism. As I was saying, this film and the research behind it, it's being made by an interdisciplinary team of architects composed by the Oficina de Arquitectura ELI, run by Uriel Fogué, Eva Gil, and Carlos Palacios, but also with a visual artist, which is in this case Maria Jerez, which is a Madrileña visual artist and performer. And they did all the footage that you saw is actually part of the movie, and they did it into the Parque Tecnológico de Valdemín Gómez. Parque Tecnológico is like technological park, is the definition that they give in Madrid to wastelands. I can imagine why. But yeah, most of the images that you saw were actually extracted from there. Chapter number 2, or episode number 2, consumption. Some keywords that will appear: cooking, care, domestic, reuse, social justice. Our kitchens are battlefields. Far more than a space for cooking and preparing meals, they are sites of profound social and political significance. Are sites where our social realities are actually built. Here, we witness the normalization of gender roles, domestic labor, family structures, and even architectural typologies are replicated until the infinitum. Yet, if we are to think these domestic laboratories, we can unlock their potential as tool for constructing alternative imaginaries and forging new models of community building and collectivity. These episodes delve into the power of the kitchen as a site for political and social transformation, and how their redefinition can challenge established norms and hierarchies, creating more just and equitable social and ecological structure in the process. Disclaimer, in terms of style, you will see that each episode is different. This episode specifically in full has a music video in which 3 different stories are told through 3 different recipes, which music has a common thread running through the film that draws the attention to the power of communal cooking and eating as a political act. I will, more, we can see the full video clip and then we can talk about it a little bit.
Chop, 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 chop. You know how they do it. 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 I go. You know how they do it. Dale pa'l chop, dale pa'l chop. Muévelo chop, muévela. Dale pa'l chop. Lo llevamos en las carnes, macerado listo para comer. No hay sabor que se compare. En el arroz yo pongo mi fe. 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 Lo llevamos en las carnes, macerado listo para comer. No hay sabor que se compare. En el arroz yo pongo mi fe. 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 Toda la buena nena lo que quieren hecho. Todo el mundo quiere calentito el arroz. Siempre estamos ready para ir hasta abajo. Aquí con mi gente compartiendo plato. Dale arriba, dale abajo. Deja que la olla haga su trabajo. Dale abajo, dale arriba. Vuelta rápido que ya llegó a la cima. Toda la buena nena lo que quieren hecho. Todo el mundo quiere calentito el arroz. Siempre estamos ready para ir hasta abajo. Aquí con mi gente compartiendo plato. Dale arriba, dale abajo. Deja que la olla haga su trabajo. Dale abajo, dale arriba. Vuelta rápido que ya llegó a la cima.
Well, is the shorter of the 5 episodes, so that's why we put it out totally. But as you can see, basically, the team who did it, which is conformed by Mayo. Mayo is an architectural office based in Barcelona. That they have been working around the kitchen, the power of the kitchen to redefine the limits of the domestic and the urban for a long time. Actually, if you didn't know about the work that Ana Pujaner, one of the members, was doing, I really recommend it, called Kitchenless City, about this very topic. You know, and how the kitchen usually have been like a tool that have invisibilized certain bodies, but at the same time is a very, very powerful political tool to actually visibilize other kind of practices and other ways in which, you know, communal cooking could be implemented in the cities. They work with Agnes Sonti-Luque, which is a Cameroonian artist, also based in Barcelona, which is very, very well connected with these different institutions or collectives that are mentioned in the video. In one side is Cindy Hogar, which is an independent union of domestic and care workers that was founded in response to the absence of an independent organization with trade union status and an approach. They have an approach, very sensitive approach to gender, class, and race in how they work. Also is Plataforma Aprofitem els Aliments, or PAA, also translated to Food Waste Reduction Platform. They focus on establishing a more responsible, sustainable food model based on a culture of food waste reduction. And finally, the last one is the collective Abarca, which is a social initiative cooperative that was established in response to the need for migrant and racialized people to self-organize, to offer support with employment and social issues. Cutting across the three collectives, you can see appears Megane Mercury. And this is something that actually Mayo and Agnes wanted since the beginning, to use music to articulate the proposal. And in this case, Megane appears as an improvising agent, who received the topics that Mayo and Agnes were putting together and did this track, this music for the film. Episode 3, distribution. We are coming out of the familiar places like digestion and consumption to more weird landscapes. Some keywords for this episode: infrastructure, fruit and vegetable exports, Mediterranean, thermal logistics, image production, aesthetic regimes. One question: how many kilometers does our food travel before it reaches to our plates? The thing is that despite our vain efforts to become locavores, our food systems remain firmly rooted into a globalized paradigm. Every day, the intricate logistic architecture that forms this distributed conveyor belt dispatches billions of calories, connecting our palates to a plethora of remote sites and topics, such as the automatic landscapes of our shipping ports, or the precarious labor supporting delivery platforms in the gig economy. These chapters examines the relationship between food and movement, and its complex interplay with various infrastructural, economic, and technological forces. It delves into aspects ranging from the climate-controlled network of cold chains. If we think about cold chains as architectures, it's probably one of the most sophisticated ones that we have built. It's a distributed architecture that has to maintain a certain climatic condition through a whole landscapes. But also the episode goes to the aesthetic regimes that imprint food with motion to ultimately spark the desire that brings them to our tables, like triggering this whole logistical chain. It starts with the Mediterranean coastal road that are some images in the background. It's when it was built, that was built actually in the 50s and was super popularized during the 60s. And nowadays have become, it was popularized because tourism, and now have popularized, it's the main route for food exporting. And the thing is that while the route towards the sun promoted this idea of a land of warm temperatures and holiday fun, the same infrastructure is now being used in reverse. This new route, emerging from this kind of images to the ones that are in the background, this new route from the sun distributes fruit and vegetables grown during mild winters, transforming the E15 motorway, which is the road, into one of the three main routes for transporting goods across the European continent. Interestingly, before they even reach the road, fruit and vegetables are transported by channels of water and either cooling circuits in processing plants, going through different stages of cooling with the objective to slow down the metabolic ripening of these goods. Remember this image for later. Some of these fruits, like the pears you're seeing on the screen, are usually stored in large controlled atmosphere cold rooms, like the one you're seeing. In these places, the oxygen is lower down to a level of almost zero. With the objective to keep the fruits for the month later and distribute it out of season. So basically there are huge buildings where all the oxygen is extracted from the building so they can maintain the fruits. When they are sent out for distribution, most of these products go through Mercabarna, which is the place you're seeing here. A logistics center encompassing 800,000 square meter of cold storage, which not only distributes products nationally, but also serves as a hub linking to wholesalers, restaurant chains, and other distributors across Europe.
Hacemos dos. ¿Sí? ¿Sí? Yo creo que también, porque dice, sí.
Sí, porque esta factura del 30 de agosto, que es cuando se supone que se entregaba todo, y luego dijeron que mejoraba las ideas.
Y la manzana,
Manzana sí tenemos que cortarla igual, pero si nosotros tenemos que intentar reducir un poco el tamaño.
porque se puede hacer cortarlo así.
Tranquila. Vamos a pintar los que tenemos bien. Está mal el color también. Ale, tú de luz. ¿Qué más va a hacer? Vale. Javi, cuando quiera, lo tengo preparado.
In the studios where adverts for food products are made, robotic cameras capture the moment that water comes into contact with fruits and vegetables skins in milliseconds. In a metaphor of the distribution of fresh produce, fruit and vegetables become moving image. The interesting thing is that these aesthetic regimes create a singular recursive process. Infrastructures of appeal that infuse motion into food to create operational images, which in return puts in motion the vegetables awaiting the cold rooms that we saw at the beginning. So this film and the amazing footage that you guys just saw was recorded, and the whole research was done by these two fellas, Gerardo Castillo-Vinuesa and Paul-Esteve Gerard is a researcher and cinematographer based actually here in London, working in Goldsmith and teaching in Goldsmith. And his work always have been going around, you know, the relation between the aesthetic regimes and food. Actually, his work has been like an inspiration for the FOODSCAPES project in the first place. He has an amazing films called Agri-Logistics that won the Documenta Prize 2 years ago that focus into the production of food. And we invite him into the pavilion to do the part related to distribution. He teamed up with Paul-Esteve Castillo, which is an architect, also based in London, that his practice gathers or focus around the architectures of desire. So actually, they both connected this idea of, you know, how we produce desire through image, you know, by infusing movement into food, that at the same time activates the recursive process of food movement through this infrastructure. Episode 4, production. It's been produced by Marina Otero Bercier and Manuel Correa. Someone recognize this image? Yes. The thing is that, well, this is Almería, Ejido, is the south of Spain. And the interesting thing is that although our cities, you know, the place where we call the metropolis, only occupy a tiny fraction of the Earth's crust, the operational landscapes are required to sustain them sprawl across vast expanses of land. In Spain, for instance, more than 23 million hectares, nearly half of the country's surface area, is used for this purpose. And one of the main places is Ejido, is the one that you see here. It's interesting to think that if we go back to the definition of what architecture is, we can think about greenhouses as architectures. We realize that the architectures that actually are visible from outer space are not neither the Great Wall or the pyramids of Egypt, are actually this kind of landscapes. This episode turns the spotlight into these places, on the agricultural landscape that feed our cities, and the architectures and dynamics that enable them to function. Within these productive geographies, a complex of interplay of bodies, many different types of bodies, territorial bodies, of course, but also human, animal, and mechanic, take place. Each body plays its part in a multifaceted interscalar dance. It is against this backdrop that issues like land colonization converge with other urgent issues such as animal instrumentalization and the exploitation of migrant labor.
Los pueblos de colonización fueron una actuación del régimen de Franco. La función principal de Estudio de la Realidad no era construir pueblos, sino poner tierras en producción. En ninguno de los pueblos había nada antes. De los 300 pueblos, mi padre solo hizo 13. Uno de los primeros fue Campo Hermoso. El nombre de Campo Hermoso lo escogió mi padre porque los nombres de los pueblos los escogían los arquitectos. Esta es la foto aérea del plano que hemos visto después. Ahora es una inmensidad de casas y de plástico más allá. Aquí se ve, se ven las parcelas. Aquí está la iglesia, con la avenida esta que se ve aquí grande. Y esto es una foto, pues no sé, pues recién, si el pueblo, pues yo no sé si está recién habitado, ¿eh? Está recién construido.
As you can see, if you were able to read the subtitles, the landscape of Almería bears the imprint of the terraforming processes that was carried out in Spain by the National Colonization Institute during the Franco regime. The architecture used in the colonization towns and infrastructure projects built at that time served to convert bodies into laborers and landscapes into resources to be exploited. Interestingly, the logic of the Francoist agrarian policy based on transforming the rural environment to increase its productivity, it still persists to this day. This search for productivity is clearly apparent from the sprawling network of greenhouses that you saw in the image at the beginning and here, which span hundreds of kilometers that are used to produce the food that sustains us. Tomatoes, zucchinis, peppers, watermelons. Inside this wide sprawl, the plastic skins of the greenhouses cast shadows over plants, insects, and agricultural workers who work relentlessly to keep the production chain going. Inside these places, they perform discrete yet interrelated operations: planting, pollination, pest control, heating, cooling, cleaning, replacing or bleaching the plastics that we saw, that are all dependent on a changing climate. That's actually climate change is in like a emerging issue right now in South Spain for the food, for the production of food. Absorbed in their familiar routine, these productive bodies rehearse and honors interspecies choreography inside specialized indoor spaces. And the thing is that it's not only humans who participate into this choreography. As you will start hearing with the zumbing. The tempos and movement of this choreography are perfected in research centers and factories that design and produce pollinator bumblebees, and insects used for biological control. But also in greenhouses where humans work amid rows of courgettes, executing repetitive manual movement and alleviating their exhaustion with energy drinks. It was crazy the amount of energy drinks, cans, waste can that you can find in Almeria. Also in industrial warehouse where laborers store, classify, and label tomatoes as they listen reggaeton. And in landfills filled with the grinket tire plastic covers from the greenhouses. But also in settlements where these heat skins are reused to house hundreds of illegalized, exploited, invisible migrants who struggle daily for survival in South Spain. 70% of the workforce that operates in Almeria is illegal migrants. Like the others, this film has been produced by a tandem of architect plus filmmaker. In this case, the architect is the researcher and curator Marina Otero Bercier. She has been directing the New Institute of Rotterdam for 7 years. For me, is one of the most amazing researchers right now operating in Spain. She's very well known into issues related to bodies, work, labor, automated landscapes. She actually worked with in the Netherlands with the automated landscape of food production there, and somehow like Almeria is the doppelganger of the Netherlands. They are always competing in terms of food production. Coming with her is also Manuel Correa, who is a filmmaker coming from Colombia, right now based in Madrid, but also he studied here in London in forensic architecture, and his work engaged with different invisibilized communities that suffer for different kind of violence from the state. Again, these are the people who record and produce some, like the film from which you saw some parts of it. This is the longest one. It's like almost half an hour, so I cannot show all of it. And the whole research was produced by them. And then we arrived to the final episode, which is episode 5, Foundation, where we go back to the soil. The thing is this place, which is as diverse as a rainforest or coral reef, we depend on it, for 90% of the food we consume. However, despite its importance, its mechanisms remain largely mysterious and poorly understood. That's why the final episode focused on soil as the primordial infrastructure on which both agriculture but also architecture depends on. To think about architecture as reassembled soil. The thing is that the soil beneath our feet constitutes the very foundation of our food systems. It's a complex ecology of microscopic processes and assemblings that mediates the chemical transformation of the geosphere into the biosphere, and to which we owe the richness and diversity of our pantries. But also the microscopic narratives emerging in this veiled realm are macroscopic in scale and scope, and studying them may be the key to achieving a more resilient, more distributed, and more diverse sustainable food system for the future. There are actually many research that link different geopolitical conflicts like the Syrian war, but also the conflicts of Yemen or Sudan with issues of soil exhaustion. How are we doing in terms of time? Okay, I think in this, maybe we can see this one entirely. Again, just as a brief, the film proposed a trans-scalar, trans-temporal journey through the geographies that articulate soil as agro-industrial infrastructure, but also has an ecosystem and a somatic archive of crimes, memories, mythologies, as you will see. Within a transient film set design, there you will encounter 3 mysterious agents that appropriate the paraphernalia of scientific laboratories and archaeological digs, rearranging their aesthetics of truth and forensic precision into dialectical weapons for political imagination. With the name Strata Incognita, they invite audiences to envision alternative ways of cultivating our relationship with the soil. Can we turn on the volume a bit?
Mira hacia abajo.
¿Qué ves?
Agotamiento, vida, mitos, raíces, memorias, crímenes, final, principio, acopio, ruinas, sal, oscuridad. A ti.
Dicen que Demócrito en el siglo V a.C. se arrancó los ojos para ver mejor.
Los regímenes de lo visible nos ciegan.
para mirar.
Extraer para entender. Clasificar para dominar. Taxonomizar. Ordenar. Someter. ¿Qué ves?
Cuando intentamos acceder a los misterios del inframundo, arrancamos sus elementos, criaturas, interrelaciones y estructuras del espacio invisible en el que constituyen mundos coherentes.
No somos capaces de ver sin ver.
Lo sometemos a un régimen de visibilidad exterminador. Lo que vemos, por tanto, para entenderte te mato.
Mira hacia abajo.
¿Qué ves?
Veo que no ves, que no ves.
Es precisamente la incapacidad de someter al suelo y sus misterios al dominio de lo visible lo que lo dota de la capacidad para encapsular mitos.
Cavar, excavar, socavar, perforar, extraer, desenterrar, enterrar. Amén.
¿Qué ves?
El mito de Sísifo. El problema, según la arqueóloga Sora Pietusdóttir, no es que las cosas se entierren profundamente en los estratos, sino que perduran, nos sobreviven y regresan a nosotras con una fuerza que no sabíamos que tenían. Una fuerza oscura
de gigantes durmientes,
despertando y despertándonos de un sueño profundo. A pocos centímetros bajo tus pies se encuentra el mundo alienígena más cercano.
En una cucharada de suelo sano hay más organismos vivos que humanos en el planeta. Hasta ahora solo conocemos el 10%. Donde tú ves un apilamiento informe de polvo, roca y materia orgánica, necromasa y biomasa se recomponen en complejas estructuras interconectadas y diferenciadas. Holobiontes.
Líquenes.
Principio. Rizosfera.
A pocos centímetros bajo tus pies, hongos mineros extraen fosfatos de las piedras y los transforman en nutrientes.
Las plantas les dan a cambio carbohidratos, azúcares y lípidos.
Raíz como infraestructura, tránsito, acopio, transacción, intercambio.
Hongos micorrízicos redistribuyen nutrientes y microbiomas a través de sus redes, llevándolos de plantas sanas a plantas insanas.
Micelio como infraestructura.
Rizosocialismo.
Myrmecosfera. Hormigas archboldi decoran sus nidos con las cabezas de sus enemigas, las hormigas de mandíbula de trampa.
Intercambio, exceso, placer, poder, envidia.
¿Qué es la inteligencia?
Hormigas podadoras cultivan hongos en las paredes de sus hormigueros y los alimentan con raciones de hoja.
¿Es la hormiga la que cultiva al hongo ¿O el hongo el que domestica a la hormiga para que lo alimente?
¿Quién cultiva a quién?
Trilosfera. Lombrices excavan túneles que resucitan suelos y sepultan ruinas. Fantasiosfera.
A pocos centímetros bajo tus pies, la ninfa de la chinche de cabeza ancha se viste de hormiga chupadora de savia y se hace pasar por ella para no ser devorada.
Carnavalosfera, queerosfera, ritosfera, excesosfera, trucosfera. ¿Quién cultiva a quién?
Eres suelo digerido.
Mira hacia abajo.
¿Qué ves?
A 900 metros de profundidad, humanos mineros extraen potasa de mares evaporados para fertilizar cultivos.
Justo encima.
48 millones de toneladas de residuos de sal forman una montaña mitológica en perpetua disolución.
Mares pasados salinizan ríos y acuíferos presentes. Gigantes durmientes. Mira hacia abajo.
¿Qué ves?
Urea, sulfato amónico, nitrato amónico cálcico, superfosfato, cloruro potásico, sulfato ferroso, bórax, sulfato de cobre, molibdato de sodio, sulfato de zinc, sulfato de manganeso. Nitroyonqui, fosfayonqui, potasayonqui.
Nota mental. Pensar otras formas de cultivar nuestra relación con los suelos. El suelo no existe para servirte. A principios del siglo XX, Fritz Haber, precursor de la guerra química, consigue con su equipo fijar nitrógeno del aire para fabricar bombas y fertilizantes sintéticos.
El milagro de los panes.
En el Holocausto, el ciclón B, un subproducto de la fijación química de nitrógeno, se utiliza para exterminar a millones de personas en las cámaras de gas, incluidos miembros de la familia Haber.
¿Abastecemos los campos de cultivo o el campo de batalla?
¿Qué es la fertilidad? Crecimiento infinito.
¿A qué precio?
Nota mental. Desnormalizar la pulsión de muerte. Mira hacia abajo.
¿Qué ves?
Necropolíticas de la biosfera y biopolíticas de la necromasa.
En una cucharada de suelo agroindustrial no hay más organismos vivos que humanos en el planeta.
¿Qué ves?
Pesticidas, herbicidas, insecticidas, acaricidas, fungicidas, nematicidas.
Guerra química para alimentar a la humanidad.
Eres suelo digerido.
Uno, dos, tres.
Antes de que
cuatro,
cuentes hasta 10, 1.000.000 de toneladas de tierra cultivable se habrán perdido en todo el mundo.
Suelo. Recurso no renovable.
Agroindustria, contaminación, sellado, desertificación, erosión, compactación, salinización.
El suelo se nos escapa entre los dedos. Los suelos no dependen de los humanos, pero los humanos dependen de los suelos.
Y sin embargo, aún no existen marcos legales internacionales para preservarlos.
¿Qué ves?
Humanos que matan por poseer tierras cultivables.
Libertad. Una palabra que el sueño humano alimenta, que no hay nadie que la explique, ni nadie que no la entienda. Propiedad.
Una palabra que el sueño humano
¿Otorga la
alimenta.
propiedad el derecho a destruir?
¿Hasta qué profundidad alcanza la propiedad? ¿Es la propietaria de una cucharada de suelo responsable de la vida de más organismos vivos que humanos en el planeta?
¿Se puede poseer lo desconocido?
¿A quién pertenece el suelo?
El polvo de arcillas del Sáhara nutre de fósforo y hierro los campos del otro lado del estrecho.
Multinacionales, fondos buitre, accionistas, fondos de
El
pensiones.
Sáhara nutre los activos agrícolas.
Acapara, agota, vende, acapara.
Mira hacia abajo.
¿A quién le pertenece el polvo?
Brujas, comuneros, espigadores, herejes, jornaleros migrantes, diásporas.
¿Un país de propietarios o un país de proletarios?
¿La tierra para quien la trabaja?
España, huerta de Europa y archivo somático de memorias arrebatadas.
Más de 2.500 fosas comunes de la guerra civil.
Edicto.
Desnormalizar el fascismo. Gigantes durmientes. Mira hacia abajo.
¿Qué ves?
El suelo como proyecto somático para abrazar lo desconocido. ¿En qué estrato nos convertiremos? Strata incógnita.
Well, again, this amazing film was done, produced and directed by a tandem of an architectural office called Grandeza Studio, composed by Amaya Sánchez Velasco and Jorge Valiente Oriol. Great studio of architecture. They have been working for a long time already with film as a main medium through which they can unfold their practice. Actually, they won the Golden Bee of the Triennale di Milano, like I think 3 years ago, with another film about the coral reef of the Great Coral Reef of Australia. They mostly have been based in Sydney, but actually very recently they moved again to Madrid. And they team up with Locumen, which is also a team of architects and mostly filmmakers, located right now in Porto, Portugal. And the amazing footage, that you see during the movies. Thanks to them, it's what they do. So that was blog number 1, which is the short film. As you can have seen, is in-depth delving into each of the 5 constitutive layers of the logistic process through a specific case study, through a specific experiment that was done by the different teams. If you produce this project somewhere else, probably the 5 films that will emerge will be very, very different, and that's something that we really like the idea. Just so you know, the films, aside than Venice, there are the 5 of them on display until November, but also we are releasing them through the FOODSCAPES website, 1 each month. So right now it's consumption streaming. So next month will be distribution, production, and finally foundation that you just saw. So actually, yeah, until November it won't be released. So actually you got the chance to watch it entirely before that. I will go very quick because I think we still have a little bit of time. Do we? Well, I will explain very, very quick the other 2 parts, and I will literally be very, very quick. Where the short films are in-depth, in-depth taxonomy of the 5 layers. What we wanted to do with the total recipe was to propose 10 case studies of how, from a certain dish, you can cut across the 5 layers in 10 different examples. What is a total recipe? A total recipe is a recipe that, unlike the normal recipes that we all know, which basically are the mixing protocols or of the ingredients already available in your kitchens, the total recipes encompass the whole infrastructural change necessary to elaborate those ingredients in the first place. So each recipe here becomes a sort of a catalyst from which to explore, trace, and document the architectures and territories that make a specific dish possible. We invited 10 architectural practices, unlike the teams that did the films whose work already was dealing with food in one way or another. Here, they were completely outsiders to the topic of food. But remember what we said, food is just the medium, not the message. So actually, they have like a very, as a group, they are a very eclectic group. Their practice is very different for each team, but they all operate in the outskirts of the architecture discipline. So we asked them to use food as an entry point towards the topics that are interesting to them. We don't have time, so I will skip some of those. I was going to present you some of the recipes. The recipes, the interesting thing about them is that they cross through different landscapes, and we invited Pedro Pejenaute, which is an amazing photographer of architecture, to took the pictures of these different 50 sites that where the architectures and infrastructure that make those recipes possible are allocated. Some, for example, are, one recipe is called protein clickbait, which analyze the increase of consumption of protein powder into the Spanish population. It's up to 40%, 14% right now, and the different architectures that are connected to those, to the production of these supplements. Some of them are sublime in a bad and good way. I mean, there's something sublime in this image, although what we see is kind of radical. But it's interesting to think that that our landscapes, our very own landscape, if we are digested soil, like Graneta was saying, or or basically reassemble soil, the creation of certain aesthetics regimes in our bodies are connected to certain kind of territorial implications. So every time we are consuming a coffee or we are consuming like a powder shake, we want or protein shake, wanted or not, we are connected to these kind of places. Other recipes, for example, they explore the physical framework that allow the production of a dish. In this case, it's a glass of wine. Not the production of the grape, but the production of the infrastructure that allows the wine to be produced. The wood, in this case, the wood that ends up in the, for example, in the top of the bottles, or the wood that is produced to create the barrels, that where the wine is conserved and fermented, and different landscapes that are participate into such processes, or just as a final one, for example, there's another which is called ghost tortilla, which is the tortilla that you order at 3 a.m. in the morning. But instead, this is done by Lucia Tajan. But instead of focusing into, you know, the where the eggs and the potatoes comes, actually focus into the digital infrastructure that allow that delivery system to actually operate. So it's analyzed, you know, the data centers, for example, where all the data that goes from our app to the data centers of Uber Eats in California, their way back through submarine cables, you know, how these data centers are connected to places like this one, which is what is called like a ghost kitchen, which are a new typology that is emerging in Madrid landscapes where food is produced, but there's no serving space for it. The pictures and short videos that you saw have been produced by Pedro Pejenaute, and also we had as editors of the recipes the Speculative Collective Black Almanac. And finally, to finalize the public program, you know, blog number 1, blog number 2, it focuses into the present of the food system, you know, its status. As you have seen, it deals with different kind of problematics. So for the third blog, we wanted to look at to the future and ask ourselves and other people, like, okay, if the food system is an architecture that has these many issues, how we redesign it? How we redesign it so it's a more ecological, just and resilient system than the one we currently have. And instead of just trying to answer this question ourselves, what we did is to create a speculative research unit. We did several open calls through different universities within Spain, like the UPM in Madrid, the UPC in Barcelona, or the University of Toledo. Through an open call, we brought 6 researchers that will be in Venice until the end of the Biennale, until the 26th of November. Operating as a research unit. They will be joined weekly by different experts. They will do field trips to different case studies within Venice and beyond. We recollect different syllabus from the experts that join us in a weekly basis. Their objective is to create, at the end of the process, what we call a future foodscapes compendium, which is a platform where we recollect like different case studies of dynamics, strategies, technologies, or systems that if they will be upscale and implemented systemically, they will mean a significant change for the food system in the next 10, 20, and 30 years in the future. And we don't want to stop there. The idea is that thanks to some partnership that we are doing, like the European Climate Foundation and the ThyssenKrupp, some of those case studies after the end of the Biennale, some of those case studies, between 3 to 5, they will be actually implemented in a real phase. So we want to look for different stakeholders to actually, you know, try in real life some of those case studies that we are recollecting. And that's it. Thank you so much.
Wow, where to start? I don't know. Are there any questions? Are there any comments? We usually continue the conversation downstairs with drinks, but I want to give the opportunity for people to comment.
Thank you. It was incredible. Yeah. I think we need a bit of time to digest it all first. But this was super great. I actually wanted to ask something that really captured my attention at the beginning of the lecture, and it was Sophia's introduction. You're being an antidisciplinary architect. Could you tell us a bit about that? Because I was really waiting for it, and then, I mean, I guess the lecture really did give an explanation to it, but yes, thank you.
Well, thank you, first of all, for your words and for the question. Well, basically, I'm not interested into like disciplinary approach of what architecture is or is not. You know, I'm interested about different topics and approach to them. Of course, I carry with myself some tools that comes from my practice and you know, university stage as an architect. But I think, to be honest, I think we waste a lot of time all the time thinking about what's an architect, what's not, what's its role, what's not. at least in Madrid. In Madrid, every year there is a congress about what's the role of the architect. You know, in 2018, 2019, we see one every year. And I'm not really interested into that. I think there are many ways in which you can engage with different kind of topics, and of course, architectural tools are very useful. But also, I think it's very, very interesting to bring tools from other disciplines like filmmaking or others to the architectural practice. At the end, you know, this goes into the definition that I gave at the beginning of what architecture is the deliberate modification of environments, and that can be done, of course, through building walls or windows or doors, but can be done also through many different ways, you know. So yeah, also I put that so people don't expect like a very academic lecture once they invite me. So it was good that you actually knew in advance.
Thank you.
Unless there are any other thoughts or questions, we will continue downstairs. I just want to add that I feel the same about the biennales, which I adore going to, don't get me wrong, but I always think like, what are we doing every year? Like, because there's a lot of time and energy and work that goes into all this, especially in the Biennale in Venice. And I think this is a brilliant example of research in the most kind of fresh and radical way that research can be addressed as, especially in such short time, right? Because we're not talking about a 5-year research project. It's what, like less than 2 years then?
Actually, we started in November last year.
In November, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
My gosh, you're fast. So I wanted to comment on that, on the nature of what it is to kind of intensely think and about something and be able to find the medium through which you kind of share it. And I find actually there is common ground between this and what we're trying to do in this kind of very, very intense 3 weeks here. So I share your kind of like anti-disciplinary approach towards education, actually. Like I think that semesters, terms, academic years are kind of completely relative term, and some of kind of the most important educational moments one can have are kind of completely beyond all of that, whether it's an exhibition, a video in a pavilion, or an experience like this one.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I think disciplinary environments are very, very useful, and they still need to be there, you know. But I also think like interdisciplinarity, which for me is different than multidisciplinarity. Multidisciplinarity is a place or a context where different discipline operates, but somehow they maintain their jurisdiction. You know, the architect does what the architect has to do. The biologist does what the biologist has to do. Interdisciplinarity is to allow people to sit on the foot of other jurisdiction that they shouldn't be dealing with. And that for me is very interesting. It's not about putting filmmakers and architects to work together. It's about putting the architects to think as a filmmaker, and the filmmaker has an architect. And I think these kind of environments are also very, very necessary at the same time that the disciplinary ones keeps on, but interdisciplinary ones are very, very important because usually the way in which we answer one question, you know, or the kind of the menu of answers that we have to a certain question is dependent on the way in which we articulate the question in the first place, right? I think that what interdisciplinarity does at the end of the day is doing different questions. When you put an architect to act as a filmmaker, he approaches to that in a very different way that the filmmaker does. And the outcome usually is very, very different. And that approach usually comes from this ability to not worry about disciplines, you know. So actually, yeah, I think it's a framework that is very important to happen. And for us, the challenge was, could we use something like a biennale with all the issues that it has, you know, as a framework from which we could unfold this kind of interdisciplinary research project? And that's at least what we tried to do.
Fantastic. I hope I can visit the actual pavilion, but I think we were really lucky to get all of this today. Thank you so much.
Thank you to you.
Let's continue with drinking now that we know where the wine is coming from.